Hi, my name is Dr. Sarah Rogers, and this is my presentation on the menstrual cycle. I am a naturopathic medical doctor and a certified acupuncturist and practice in Payette, Idaho, as well as on telehealth. As a naturopathic medical doctor, I work to treat the whole person, find and treat the cause of disease, treat support the ability to heal, and be a teacher as much of a doctor, and of course, obviously, do no harm and help people prevent disease in the long run. I also do acupuncture. This is not part of the talk, but acupuncture is a system of medicine as a whole in and of itself. I use it as an adjunct to my naturopathic practice. So, menstruation. What is menstruation to you? Menstruation could be just like that time of the month, which is a little dragging down, frustrating, people maybe seeming a little stupid for a week, but then everybody miraculously gets their intelligence back after your period ends. It could be increased bloating, food cravings, fatigue. Every woman is different, and it is important to recognize that everybody has a different experience. The common menstrual issues that I see in my practice is usually the PMS symptoms, menstrual pain, cramping, and heavy menses. And there's a much bigger discussion about the menstrual system as a whole, but this discussion is very limited to these three things. So what is PMS? It can occur 1 to 14 days prior to a cycle. Usually it's a few days for most people, maybe up to a week, but I do have some patients that don't feel well from day 14 on to the first day of their cycle. And there's a lot of causes for this. We're not going to go into every cause, but we're going to talk about hormone imbalance, inflammation, nutritional deficiencies, specifically B vitamins. That's your B1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or not 7, 8, 9, and 12. Also calcium and vitamin D. I really like to use this graphic to teach people what their menstrual cycle is, because I find a lot of women don't know. So we have day 1 is the first day that you bleed, and then day 28 or whatever day it is that you start to bleed, that also becomes day 1 again. So what happens is, as your uterine lining is sloughing off, all the hormones are usually low. Estrogen and progesterone are from your reproductive organs, your ovaries, and then your FSH, your follicle stimulating hormone, and your LH are from your brain. And there's a communication between the brain and the ovaries throughout the whole cycle. So what happens is your follicle stimulation hormone starts helping a part of the ovary to develop into an egg that will eventually burst forth. And as it develops, the estrogen levels come up. And at a certain point, the estrogen levels rise so much that it triggers, the estrogen from your ovary triggers your brain hormone called luteinizing hormone to release, which will then stimulate the ovary to release that egg. And then you are now in the luteal phase. And the luteal phase lasts for another 14 days. And this part of the ovary that releases the egg also produces a little bit of estrogen. So you can see that estrogen goes down after the follicle has been made, but then it goes back up because of the corpus luteum. But mostly progesterone is being made. And progesterone helps hold on to that uterine lining until the corpus luteum stops producing that estrogen and progesterone, and then because of that, there's no more building of the lining, and there's no more stabilizing or holding on to the lining, and you start all over, and that sloughs off. And I find that when I discuss this with my patients, and we can put your symptoms together with this, people understand what is going on with their cycle. There might need to be some testing going on at different stages within the cycle, but a lot of times we can sort of figure out what might be happening and then create the appropriate testing. So there's some suggestions nutritionally for PMS. Number 1, food, anti-inflammatory diet, so reducing that sugar, reducing processed foods, and focusing on whole foods, because we know that inflammation can make everything worse, including the hormone balance and the inflammatory products during PMS. So you want to choose colorful organic fruits and vegetables and plan your diet around these. Add the proteins and the fats and maybe some grains around your vegetables rather than adding vegetables to a big plate of rice and maybe a beef or chicken meal. You want to add those to your vegetables, not the other way around. You want to decrease those inflammatory animal products, not to say you shouldn't have them, but you want to know that those are inflammatory foods. So beef, pork, dairy, eggs, that sort of thing. And you want to increase the anti-inflammatory foods, such as your essential fatty acids from fish or potentially some things like fruits and vegetables, as well as your flaxseed meal, that sort of thing. Also, some specific supplements can be really helpful. A multivitamin can provide that calcium as well as your B vitamins and a little bit of vitamin D. Fish oil supplementation will take care of all the really good anti-inflammatory fats that you need. That will be really helpful as an adjunct to an anti-inflammatory diet. If you're vegan, you might want to consider either flax oil or even better, an algae oil. And then for vitamin D, you never know what your vitamin D levels are unless you test for them. I do suggest that you test. If needed, you supplement. And then after 6 weeks of supplementation, get your vitamin D levels tested again to make sure that you are on track with that product, because a lot of products may not be beneficial to raise it as much as you would like. So menstrual pain. Menstrual pain, for some women, they just slide through their menstrual cycle really easily, and some women have very painful periods, and then other people are somewhere in between. If you think about the uterus as a muscle that gets worked out once a month, then you sort of can understand why you might want to prepare that muscle to work out. There's also inflammatory products that might be contributing to this as well. So you might want to think about, for the whole month, preparing to work out that muscle. So one of the biggest things is making sure you're well hydrated. There is a molecule called arginine vasopressin that will get triggered when you're slightly dehydrated. And this slight dehydration can occur even before you feel thirsty. So maintaining your good hydration throughout the day and throughout the month can help reduce that activation of arginine vasopressin. Nutrition. So we talked a little bit about this before with B vitamins. Magnesium is one of the most deficient nutrients that we have in this country, and it is a muscle relaxer. It is also a natural anti-anxiety mineral, so that can be really helpful taking magnesium. Essential fatty acids, we talked a little bit about this as fish oil. There's also nuts and seed oils. There's primrose oil, borage oil. Those are essential. Essential means that we don't make them and we actually have to get them from our diet. And then flexibility. If we learn how to stretch the muscles throughout the month, that helps support the pelvic region. Your menstrual cycle, the muscles used in the uterus might already be ready to go to stretch and to be used. So something like a cat and cow exercise that you can learn either online or through a yoga class, those are one of the easiest things to do to stretch out your back. And if you're like me and you sit all day, this is something that you can do easily for a couple minutes every day. There's also a lot of other yoga pelvic opening exercises that you might want to consider, but this is the easiest one to get started. And even if you're sitting and you can't get on your knees because of whatever issue you have with your knees, you can either put some padding under your knees or you can sit in your chair and just sort of move your pelvis back and forth and open that up. All right, so some women have heavy menses. Menses usually occur every 28 days. They usually last between 4 and 7 days. You usually bleed about an ounce. Blood loss for heavy menstruation is more than double that. If you use a cup, you can measure how much that is. If you bleed more than 35 days or less than 21 or 24 days, you might want to see a gynecologist to get checked out whether there is a hormonal imbalance or a structural imbalance, a structural issue. Maybe there's a fibroid growing. During perimenopause, which is that period it can last for 7 years or more for some women, that is right before the loss of menstruation in menopause, menstrual flows may get erratic or may increase in flow. If there's a really heavy flow, even if it's sort of normal for that period of your life, you do want to go get a gynecological exam and make sure nothing is going wrong. Hormone intervention may be needed. That is a more complex subject. Bioidentical hormones I've seen work really well with this. Nutrition for heavy menses. So making sure that you are not anemic is really important. Taking an iron supplement that does not constipate you is helpful. I really like Floridix as an over-the-counter liquid, really mild iron support. There's also other irons that don't constipate you, so you can always ask me about that. You want to take vitamin C along with your iron to help with absorption. Also, vitamin A deficiency. This is where the multivitamin comes in again, getting your vitamin A. Vitamin A deficiency may reduce your hormone activity, and if you have low hormones, you might have heavier flows. Also, those B vitamins again help with estrogen dominance, and if you have lots of estrogen buildup of your lining, you're going to have heavier flows. So helping to detoxify those estrogens is really helpful, and the B vitamins are really important. Also something called bioflavonoids. Bioflavonoids are compounds that are found in fruits and vegetables, the really colorful ones, that help maintain blood vessel integrity. So if you are somebody who is not eating your fruits and vegetables, the first thing you can do is get some natural colors in your diet along with vitamin C, and that'll help with that tissue integrity and maybe help reduce that flow. And then there's herbs such as chaste tree berry, or called Vitex, that help raise progesterone levels, which will help maintain that uterine lining and reduce the chances of it sloughing off too early. So overall, how can you improve your menstrual cycle? Number one, we talked about nutrition, did that a lot, limiting toxic exposure, and helping with stress modification. So my apologies to happyeatshealthy.com. I stole your great image. I want to give you credit for that. And to help emphasize the fact that you are what you eat. And we really want you to be fulfilled with lots of colors. We want to have the rainbow within our bodies. We do not want to have all this junk food. Once in a while is not a big deal, but we want to build our diet around our colorful fruits and vegetables. There is a great website called Environmental Working Group, and they have something called Food News and the Dirty Dozen list that comes out every year that helps you determine which foods have the highest pesticide content, which ones have the lowest. So if you have budget considerations for your shopping, you want to choose the foods that are organic on the Dirty Dozen, and you might be okay with getting away with not buying organic avocados because they really don't retain their pesticides. You want to avoid junk food, fast food, and fried food. These are all really detrimental and inflammatory. You want to eat non-toxic fish. There's a lot of lists online where you can find what levels of mercury are in certain fish. Wild Alaskan salmon has a really good profile. Also, small fish. So things like sardines and anchovies will have less mercury in there. And then I have on my website suggestions about eating healthy, and you're welcome to download that. And that's at idnatmed.com. Healthy, I think it's Health Articles by Dr. Rogers. Also, remembering your multivitamin, your fish oil. Probiotics are important because as things go through our liver, get detoxified, sometimes not good bacteria will actually reabsorb that estrogen in a way that continues to keep your estrogen in your body. And good probiotic balance or good bacteria will make sure that that does not happen. So taking a regular probiotic will help manage estrogen detoxification as well. And then, of course, magnesium. I also have on my website a link for how to choose a good multi. I don't give out any specific suggestions for specific products, but just looking at labels and the things that you want to look at. Hydration. I talked earlier about how hydration is important, and that if you're slightly dehydrated before you even know you're thirsty, your cramps can increase. So getting at least half your body weight in ounces. So if you're a 150-pound person, you want to have at least 75 ounces of water a day. If you sweat more, you might need a little more. If you never sweat, you might need a little less. If you exercise, you might want to think about adding a cup of water for every 30 minutes of exercise. Also, you want to avoid plastic water bottles because they contain phthalates or plasticizers that will get into your water, which we're going to discuss next of why that's not a good idea. And you want to choose chlorine-free as much as possible. So if you can, you want to get a chlorine filter both on your drinking water and your bathing water, and taking out the chlorine. Okay, toxins. This is something that a lot of people don't talk about, but it is very important. So we get a lot of toxins just from our personal care products and our cosmetics, and it can affect our hormones in a detrimental way. So both phthalates, which is plastics, and parabens, which are preservatives, can affect us in our health, both men and women. So exposure to these plastics and preservatives can lead to early onset puberty, and then as well in adults, hormonal dysregulation for both adults and for pubescent girls. So one article from 2019 showed that each doubling of monoethyl phthalate in a pregnant woman resulted in the daughters that they had of having earlier menses by earlier by a month, about 40 days. So that might not seem a lot, but every time a woman had increased levels, you're going to have even earlier onset of puberty, and this was pubertal development. They also found that when they measured parabens in girls, their onset of puberty was also affected. So this is a really important concept to think about, both for ourselves as women, but also for unborn girls as well as developing girls. Why do we care about this? Why is it important to think about not having early menses? The earlier a girl starts her period, there is an increased risk over her lifetime of breast cancer and endometrial cancers. There was also a recent study in 2001 that showed that women who have earlier menses are at a greater overall mortality risk in their lifetime from cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, and premature mortality of all causes. So we really want to reduce that toxin exposure or anything that might increase the risk of earlier onset of puberty. So what is the first thing that you can do? There's a lot that you can do. There are some articles on my website in the health articles section, but the biggest thing that you can do, the first thing that you can do, is any product that you have in your life that lists fragrance, and get rid of it. And the reason is, in 1936, the word fragrance was deemed proprietary, and manufacturers do not have to disclose what's in it, which means there can be multiple chemicals in one word on a label that they don't have to disclose. So it is important to read your labels. If a product says fragrance as essential oils, that is probably fine. But if it doesn't say that, you will never know what's in that product, and it's probably better to find an alternative that will list what's on there. So that's the easiest thing to do. So whether it is in a real perfume, a scented candle, or dryer sheets, or laundry detergents, bar soap, hand soap, shampoo, any of these things, you are affecting your hormones by using these products. There's also fragrance in plastic trash bags now, which I think is utterly ridiculous. So choose essential oils and fragrance-free products for everything that you do. There's 2 apps that can help with this. In addition to the fragrance, they can tell you if there's other compounds that have been shown to be detrimental to your health. One is Think Dirty app, and the other one is the Environmental Working Group Healthy Living app. So I think it's really important to use both of those. You can scan UPC symbols, those barcodes on products before you even purchase them, and make sure that there's not a problem. All right, so the other thing we're going to talk about is stress. I'm doing this talk for the Four Rivers Cultural Center. It's a 4-week lecture series, and the next lecture is going to be about hormones, and that's where I'm going to be discussing the effect of stress on hormones. And the big one that people don't necessarily always talk about is cortisol and its effect on our hormones. So I'm looking forward to that lecture next week. I'm going to leave you at the end with a healthy menstruation checklist. 1, get your exercise. 2, eat organic food as much as possible. Use the Environmental Working Group Dirty Dozen and Clean 15 lists. Drink your water to avoid those cramps. Try as much as possible to avoid toxins. That's your herbicides, pesticides, as well as plastics. You might want to consider taking a multivitamin, magnesium, probiotics, and vitamin D on a regular basis in your fish oil. Find time for yourself. As women, we don't always take the time for ourselves, but that's a really important component of health. So find the time of whatever works for you. A little exercise, a little quiet time, socialization, all these things will help with your hormone balance. And then there's some herbs called Vitex, as well as ashwagandha and rhodiola, which we're going to talk about on the next lecture about hormones. I do suggest regular blood testing. If your physician believes you need to do a hormone panel, that would be great. But also regularly a complete blood count, a metabolic panel, your thyroid, including free T3, your iron and ferritin, which is iron storage, cholesterol, and vitamin D. And thank you. I hope you enjoyed this presentation. You can find my handouts on idnatmet.com and on the healthy articles list, and I'd be happy to chat with you if you would like to make an appointment.